Right. Now, this is the really boring bit where I have to say things like, before we begin, sit down, Ruby. Before we begin, can I ask you to make sure your mobile phones are switched to silent? Can I also remind you this event is being recorded, and if you'd like to share the podcast and video with friends and colleagues, they'll be available for free download from the RSA website in a few days' time. This is also being live web streamed, so Ruby, wave at online viewers. Both of them will be there, they'll be all coming on now. But if you all tweet hashtag RSA Mind, if you want to get involved in the discussion on Twitter, then that will draw people in as well. And a few of you can tweet now that we've just begun, and there'll be a few more coming in. So we won't take offence if you're tweeting away, even if secretly you're actually just texting and stuff. Now,
we will be offended.
I think this, I'm really, look, I love Ruby, and you all love Ruby, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And both of us are involved in what I think is, excuse me, one of the most important campaigns of our time, which is the Time to Change campaign, to change attitudes towards mental health and mental illness. And just last week, we saw how far we've got to go when 3 of the most successful and iconic companies in this country, Asda, Tesco and Amazon, saw nothing wrong whatsoever in selling mental patient Halloween costumes, complete with Mad Axe Man and blood and all the rest of it. Thanks to the campaign, thanks to social media and all the different sort of campaigns that we're involved in under the umbrella of Time to Change and Ruby with Black Dog Tribe, we got them sorted out and taken off within a matter of hours. But there is a long, long way to go. And I don't know if you know this, but in the National Health Service Constitution, another major success of the last Labour government, there is meant to be parity of treatment, services and understanding between physical and mental health. Well, let's be honest, we all know that that does not exist, so we've got to keep campaigning for that. Now, Ruby is we all know her as a comedian, a writer. I know her best as a mental health campaigner. She's American, but that's fine. She basically, like Kevin Spacey and other great Americans, prefers Britain.
I like to pay a lot of taxes. So.
Okay, that's good. Well, go and live in France. And I didn't know until I checked this out, she began her acting career with the Royal Shakespeare Company, so she actually has that connection with Britain's greatest ever human being. She went on to write and perform in her own popular TV programmes, BBC and Channel 4, and she was the script editor on all series of Ab Fab. She's got a master's degree in mindfulness, and the book, wave the book, Abby, wave the book. That book is all about that sort of journey, her journey, but also stuff for other people to learn about mindfulness. And she got this master's degree in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy from none other than another great British institution, Oxford University. And she is a relentless and brilliant campaigner on mental health and mental illness. She's got a book out, I've got a book out about mental illness, about a teenage alcoholic, and they're over there, and afterwards you can come and talk to us and spend lots of money, and then we can carry on raising the money to go out and carry on campaigning and changing the world. Because I'll tell you, the only way to change the world is decide to change the world. And some of you may know there's this row going on at the moment about the Daily Mail and Ed Miliband, and some of you may know that I really, really, really hate the Daily Mail. Let me just tell you one of the other reasons why I really, really hate the Daily Mail. It's because of the way they cover mental health. And not just them. But you you very, very rarely see debate. Yes, you do on television and on the radio. 5 Live, for example, absolutely brilliant, their coverage of mental health and mental health issues. But the newspapers, the constant linking of violence and mental illness, when in fact the person who's mentally ill is far more likely to be a victim of violence than a perpetrator, psycho killer on the loose. I'm not saying that's not the story. If somebody's a paranoid schizophrenic and they kill somebody in the street, I'm not saying you shouldn't report that. But if that is all that people ever hear about mental health and mental illness, then don't be surprised if the stigma and the taboo that we're trying to break down, and the stigma and the taboo that leads to discrimination against people who are mentally ill, that's going to be reinforced and continue to take longer and longer and longer to combat. So that's why we're involved in this. We've both had our own experiences, and Ruby now will talk a little bit about her own. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I stand up? Then I'll sit down. I approached mental illness kind of from left field because I never would have mentioned. Do I look in the camera, or who am I looking at?
Look where you want.
Yeah, I'll look at you. Because you're 1 out of 4, so I can spot one. So I never would have mentioned that I had anything wrong because, of course, the fear of being fired. So it was very, covert. But then Comic Relief said, could they take my photo? Because they were sending some money to mental health charities, and they knew something wasn't right. So I said, okay. And then I thought it was going to be a little picture of me, a postage-size stamp. But instead, it was a gigantic poster of me in the underground that said, this woman has mental illness, please help her. So I was mortified, so I hurled myself in front of it, thinking that's the end of it. But then as you go down, it repeated itself all the way down, and then it was all over London. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to write a show and make that look like it's my publicity poster. How savvy is that? So I had to write a show, and I toured it in mental institutions because, and what was remarkable is that was the greatest reward I ever got in my career because I was with my people. And I always think if you can make a schizophrenic laugh, you're halfway to Broadway. And the bipolars laughed and cried. But, and my favorite line, I'm going off piste here, but was my husband and I were in a serious lockdown, with the metal bars, and this serious psychopath came over to us, and he said, I'm your biggest fan. Which one of you is Ruby Wax? So anyway, let me just jump to, there was, obviously I wasn't paid, but what they did do is let me stay overnight and go into the smoking room. And that is the greatest entertainment and conversation you'll ever hear in your life. But finally, I was with my people, and because if you're with them, you understand that it isn't about being sad. Depression, unfortunate word, is not about because you're having a bad hair day, or even if somebody died. That's the human condition. That's mourning. That's sadness. Unfortunately, depression is when your personality leaves town, and it's as if you're suddenly filled with cement. There's nobody at home, and then the horror of it is you have to imitate who you used to be like. And by the way, nobody notices. So this is what eventually burns you out, because not only you have a disease, but you have the shame piled up on top. And so we get these abusive voices because we're in the West. I have shoes. I have a fabulous career. So you get these abusive voices, which is the disease, but you don't get one abusive voice. You get about 100,000 abusive voices. Like if the devil had Tourette's, that's what it would sound like. So anyway, I sat in a chair for 3 months, and of course people say, does it make your work any better? Excuse me, I'm a cube of lead. What am I supposed to, it's mistaken. What creativity, and here's another bitch, is when they say, you're in entertainment, does that have anything to do with it? I say my insides don't know what my outside does for a living. Do all weather girls get cancer? It's 1 in 4, and that's in the universe. That's everywhere. Whether you're in entertainment or you live in a mud hut or what culture you come from, depression just loves everybody. So then I began my campaign. I thought, in the second half of my show, the audience get to ask questions. And suddenly it was as if we were all liberated because we have no place to meet. We have, alcoholics have their walk-in center, and boy, are they organized. There's a place on every corner with cigarettes and cookies, totally, on every corner. And I think, how did they organize that? Because these people are drunks. But I used my theater whenever I did my show, is that the one day I wasn't working, I said, this is a walk-in center. I allowed people to come off, I invited people to come in off the street, and then I provided them with the whole army from SANE charity. So now people could ask individual questions, and then I bring in neuroscientists and Peter Fonagy and Lewis Walport, so people could ask the questions that none of us know where to go to. Did I pass this to my child? What are drugs doing to me? I'm too ashamed to take drugs. Yeah? Would you be ashamed to take chemotherapy? This is a real disease. This is not, there's nobody up there with a bullhorn, and you didn't wake up thinking, should I have depression or learn golf? It's the real McCoy. I mean, and that's what we're trying to pass on. This isn't imagination, so I was so curious about it. I'll hurry up because we want to get back to Alastair and he's getting furious. I can feel it.
Tweeted about you.
Okay, all right.
I'm asking the question, what is a serious psychopath?
What is a serious
As opposed
psychopath?
to just a psychopath.
Well,
Carry on,
no,
ignore me,
it's all
carry
right.
on, carry on, carry on.
You know, a neurotic thinks that what's the one? A psychopath believes he's God. A neurotic just thinks, oh, there's anybody know that quote? Anyway,
Carry on.
yeah, all right, thanks for screwing me up. You can cut that out. Anyway, I was so interested in what happens in the mind, what actually the story is, and it's not 1 in 4, it's 4 in 4. We all live in this world, we're not equipped for the 21st century. It's just too hard, it's too fast, it's too full of fear, we don't have the bandwidth. And none of us actually talk to each other. By the constant influx of bad news, and newspapers like the Mail like to jack it up because we haven't got enough fear. So I have to know every murder that's happened. I mean, can we not limit ourselves on how much we need to know? Everything is jacked up, so we're in this kind of state of arousal. You know, you almost, when the hurricane calms down, we're almost disappointed. It builds us to this fallacious frenzy. I mean, why do I have to know why do I have to know if there's an earthquake 20,000 miles away? Or there's a shark attack in Malawi? We were only supposed to know what our neighbors were doing. You know, if the woman next door to me was having sex with the guy next door to her, I should know that. But 4 doors down, that's none of my business. We're not supposed to know that. But I'm not going to bitch about, you know, here we are, it's a digital age. It's here, okay? And we have to stop blaming the Muslims and, the government. Somebody voted him. They didn't drop from heaven. Or the global warming. The real problem is in us, in our brains, in the mothership. That's where the conflict is. And until we start to understand that this is in us, and we start to untie this conflict within ourselves, the rest of the world, it'll just carry on. And we'll blame the next guy and the next guy. So I was really interested. I won't go into it, but I decided I wanted to learn really the meat of how our brains work, because that's where the answer is. And P.S., let me just say, the least money is spent on brain research. And this is where everything else emanates from. I'm sorry, criminality. You get those kids when they're young, those brains are malleable. Okay, we won't have that kind of sociopath that grows out of that. Diabetes too, cancer, suicide, depression, cardiac problems. It all emanates from the brain, but it's not a sexy disease, so very little money is spent on that. So I went to Oxford, and I learned that you can change the way you think, that there is a way of self-regulating. Now, this doesn't get to the public. We just get books on how to hug your inner elf. You know, there are ways that if we understand how this little baby works, how it really works, and what the chemicals are that drive us to this kind of frenzy, it isn't what's out there, it's what it does to our cortisol. And we're always in a high state of alarm, always in a high state of alarm. And we really have to understand that in order to deal, in order to be creative with each other, in order for me to understand who you are, I've got to cool it. I've got to bring down that cortisol. So that's what I've been studying. And you know, eventually we'll all have to figure it out, because there'll be no more money for beds or medication or even therapists. So really, the money should be put forward in some way that each individual will learn, we're screwed, now what do we do about it? Don't pretend everything's fine. It's not fine. So that's what I studied. I hope someday I'll be able to stand here and explain to you what cortisol levels do and how to bring them down. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I don't attack the next person thinking it's them. I know, you know, I know the anger comes from me. So thank you very much, and let's get back to Alastair.
You said the thing about 4 in 4. Do you think the 1 in 4 figure, you need that sort of sense of proportion to try and communicate to the public how big this is, but do you think actually it's become a bit of a difficulty? Because I've always felt it's too conservative. We've all got physical health, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, so why is it not 4 in 4, and maybe 1 in 4 get a serious mental health problem? We all have mental health.
Well, I think the dividing line is getting thinner. I mean, before, depression was as if you had, I don't know, diabetes or whatever, you crossed the line. But now, because of the constant pumping of needing to know everything, why can't we just say, you know what? I can't come up with a solution about Syria. I don't know. How would I know? But it's shameful if we don't know everything. It's shameful if we're not busy all the time. So I think this high level of anxiety has fed into the 404. And we don't have a name for the diseases, but I would say we're all infected.
And this mindfulness stuff that you're doing, just briefly tell us what it... Just assume that somebody's landed from Mars and they haven't got a clue what it is. What is it?
Again, I'm not an evangelist. It just happened to work for me because, you know this, with depression, it just jumps on your back and suddenly you're out of town. So I actually got into this because I studied the brain research, and that and cognitive therapy had the best results for dealing with relapse to prevent it. So I can hear the early pitter-patter, you know, when it starts.
Mine's over there.
Yeah. Okay, but you know that one where the voices, the quality of the voices, we all have abusive voices, by the way. Everybody always asks, why is it so critical? May I say, nobody has a voice that says, what a wonderful job I'm doing, and may I say how attractive I am today. Nobody has it. But again, if you study this, if you look at science, it'll explain why we have it and why it was really good for our survival hundreds of thousands of years ago. But again, it didn't know this was coming. It can't tell the difference if there's an animal behind you or there's a social threat. So everybody's kind of alarmed. Oh my God, I didn't send an email. Oh my God, I have a fat behind. Oh my God, I didn't get invited to So we're constantly like this. In answer to your question, I think that therapy, I'm sorry if anybody's a therapist, was a really good guess. I mean, Freud couldn't get in the head, so he came up with this. Is it time to stop?
It wasn't a mobile phone. Didn't go against the rules because I think it was a musical instrument. Not
Okay, yeah.
Fine.
Another crazy person.
I will get out my bagpipes very shortly.
Yeah. You'll know who the 1 in 4 is because they've got the harmonicas. It's easy to spot. Anyway, with cognitive therapy, we start to question the way we think. You know, if each time I have the same behavior.
Is cognitive therapy the same as mindfulness?
No, but they're in the same ballpark. Mindfulness came out of cognitive therapy.
Okay. I thought mindfulness was all about breathing.
It's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, so it's the next zeitgeist.
So tell me what it is.
Okay, so it's actually separating yourself a little bit from the oncoming thoughts, you know, because it's a bombardment. So there is another part of your brain.
But hold on a minute, how do you do that? I've tried all that.
Okay, can I finish?
Yeah, but just tell us just give me an idea of what it is, what you actually do to get to that.
All right, basically, I'll explain what you do. There is a part of your brain, the amygdala is up all the time. That's the alarm system. There's a part of your brain called the insula, and everybody has it. You don't have to go on Amazon. When you feel something in your body, like a stomach ache or something, you know, in your body, the insula becomes active. If you practice just a few minutes a day, when these voices, and you have to be the judge of that, sometimes they're really useful. You problem solve, you got a deadline. But we're creatures of habit. And if we don't watch it, we're always on the, when is the last email? When can I stop? We don't have a braking system. When you feel the thoughts are not productive and you're going into rumination, you know, there's some questions you can't answer, like, why does nobody call me? Why did my boyfriend leave me? That's rumination. You'll never come up with an answer to that one. When you notice the thoughts are not really working for you, you send your attention, and this is hard, to something physical, to a sense in the body. So either your foot on the floor or sound, if you just listen. You cannot use the insula and the amygdala at the same time. I mean, this is what science is so great about. If you listen and send your attention, just listen for a minute, the anxiety automatically goes down. So just do it for 10 seconds.
So tell us what we're doing.
Listening. Without being sarcastic. Now, you'll notice that you're going, this is stupid,
No.
You know. All right, when
I'm
you
trying to
notice
listen,
it.
but you're talking.
All right, go back to listening. thank you. So when your mind grabs you back, you really hear the nature of who you are. Mine says, I'm so embarrassed. People are looking at me. How dare I do this? We all have our recordings. But here's the other part, is you learn to not make judgments. You learn to say, okay, that's my recording. I'm going to go back to listening. So it gives you a little bit of an anchor and have a view of who you are, because this is what a shrink does. He sort of sits there, has compassion, and whatever garbage you come up with, he holds it. So now, in a sense, you're viewing it, but you're also giving yourself a break.
And have you been getting depression less since?
I haven't had it for 7 years, and I will have it. This isn't a disease that you wish away, but a few times I've dodged the bullets. Because I sit a few minutes a day, it's just like developing a muscle. It's like doing a sit-up. The insula gets a lot more gray matter around it. So then, when the shit hits the fan, right, and I send my attention to either the bottom of my feet or listening, or actually you can trace your breath, but that starts to sound too fluffy. You actually are developing this thing, so when there's a lot of stress, you have an alternative. You can bring it down into your body, which we never use. It's just this lump of meat we drag around. So actually you're learning an anchor. You're learning, well, cognitive therapy, you have to work with a therapist. With this, you do it on your own. You do it at a bus stop, you know, when you're going, come on, come on, come on. Looking at your watch isn't going to make the bus come any faster. So if you just stop and breathe, or you feel the ground, or you actually look at another person, I mean, just look. And when your thoughts go back, which they will, because they've been going for 25 years or 35 years and saying, I'm an idiot, why am I here? At least you're present. Because you can't listen yesterday or tomorrow. At least you're present, and this is something none of us are trained for.
And do you do it, you say you do it a few minutes a day. That's like sitting down calmly and doing that very, very consciously. But does it become something that you do all the time?
No, no. Well, it would be nice if you could, but then you would be the Dalai Lama.
I mean, can you do it on the move? Can you be...
Completely. If you're walking, let's say, if you're in a hurry, if you start to notice the weight of your body, the way, when there's interoception, that's immediately, that insula is lighting up. Immediately. It's not something you're imagining. As soon as you go in your body, I mean, Tai Chi does it too, or some people do it with yoga. As soon as you're doing it for show, that's not what I'm talking about. But a pianist will only grow the neurons to play better if he's actually in his fingers. If we multitask, it doesn't register as any learning. And multitasking, by the way, is the most, I mean, we need it, but it's like having too many windows open. Eventually your computer will crash. But when you want to, like with my kids, I never really, I didn't see them growing up because I was always on the telephone. And they were trying to tell me about the dead hamster, and I was going, yeah, yeah, yeah. They actually thought I had two metal things growing out of the side of my head. So they asked me what they were like. I have no idea. But I think with this, like this working of the insula, even for a few minutes, even when you're on the tube, now when I'm with my kid, it's so hard to break those habits. I shut down the computer. It's so difficult. I put down the iPhone, and I just listen. And the kid knows I'm there. Because the other guy knows you're with him. You can tell when I'm really with you or when I'm thinking about where I parked my car. And if I have that if I'm in that state will pass to her and to him and to you, because we work like neural Wi-Fi. So it isn't just about I feel better. This is about the conflict is over. I feel what you feel. She feels what he feels. And this makes business a different environment, and it makes our lives a different environment. If we're constantly arguing upstairs and we're isolated, and the war will continue.
So you, I was really surprised when you haven't had a bad bout of depression for 7 years.
A little bit's come in where I can feel the quality change. I feel my lips getting that thing like you'd get if you were on coke. Not that we've ever done it.
I've never done that.
But
I have not.
No, I know.
And if I had, I'd be an addict, so...
But we are addicts to our own chemicals. That's another glitch in the human being. You know, some of us love adrenaline. I like to pack my suitcase when the taxi comes to take me to the airport. That we're really addicted to our own chemicals. But if you know that, it's better to hold the anchor and just let it play on, because suddenly you realize thoughts aren't something solid. You can actually have the choice.
But 7 years says that you can sort of crack it. I've always assumed that mine is a sort of life sentence that will come.
I did too.
Intermittently.
If you look at the research, it's mindfulness and cognitive that have the highest % of preventing relapse. Oh, I'm also on medication, let me just say.
Right.
You know, I'm suddenly not, you know, having a white light experience here and going on
And you're on
Oprah
medication all the time?
all the time. But as you know, medication isn't the gift from God, because otherwise we wouldn't have relapses. But I have
But
to
7
say,
years is a long time.
I've never gone 7 years. I may be in there tomorrow, but I'll tell you, I'll know when it's coming.
And it's interesting you said pitter-patter, pitter-patter.
Yeah,
And
it's
mine is like a kind of helicopter that's the rotor blades are going over there and it's coming in, and eventually the cement, I agree with the cement, it sort of comes in.
Yeah.
Do you think everybody's depression is different, and do you think one of the problems that we've got in trying to campaign and explain on this is that as it is all inside here, and your hair doesn't fall out, and you don't need crutches, and you're not in a wheelchair, that actually people who don't understand it
Will
really,
think you're
really
making it up.
Yeah, well, they think it's kind of just a bit unreal. It's not within their the orbit of their comprehension.
Well, again, if this was available in a newspaper, because no good news is, they can actually see where Alzheimer's is. They can see where it is. They can see where schizophrenia is. That's way ahead of the game. And you wouldn't say to somebody with Alzheimer's, come on, remember what I said yesterday. So the same thing with depression. It is in there. They're getting very close, because now there's something called transcranial stimulation, where they can actually, because it's all electric up here, there's no voices. This is electric carrying information from one area to another. So that even makes me feel better. No voices. You know, if you picture this kind of electric grid, so when the voices come, you're an idiot, everybody's looking, I just go, okay, incoming, and they lose their solidity. But when you understand that you can actually look in, you can see cancer, that's easy. Now you're starting to see different diseases. There's an illness where whenever you see your mother, you think it's a giraffe. Now they know that exists, because if you get a lesion or you're knocked on the head, that reality's gone. So of course, depression is somewhere else. Very soon you'll be able to take, I think they have a sweat galvanizing test. You've got depression. And the other thing is, if you look in somebody's eyes with depression, you'll notice that it doesn't look sad. It's like a dead animal. And if teachers were taught, you know, to see what that looks like, they'd be able to pick out who really needs help. And we wouldn't have cutting, and we wouldn't have so much suicide. It is something that exists. Your skin changes, your hair changes. It's not your imagination. No matter how rich you are, it's going to get you like cancer does. It gets everybody.
Just on, you're obviously from America, but you spend a lot of time here. Just give me a sense of the difference between Britain and America in terms of attitudes and also services, without getting into the details.
The Americans are appalling. If they do diagnose you with mental illness, you're allowed in a hospital 3 days, and then you're out, no matter how much insurance you have. So they have it much worse. They probably have private hospitals if you pay. And in this country, they have it, but nobody can afford it, because Bupa only lets you in there for about a week. I make a joke that, you know, the Priory doesn't like when people run out of money. So I saw some women, you know, they just had electroshock therapy. Their insurance ran out and then made them leave the building. Their heads were still smoking. I'm being funny, but there was a woman there who they said, out of here now. This isn't care. Where's the care? And then with the GPs, they're not specialists in that. Would you have chemo from a GP? So they throw some M&Ms at you just to nullify everybody and keep them quiet.
Well, the other thing, one of the psychiatrists who actually I know really, really well, and is one of the people I dedicated this book to, he specialises in treating doctors and dentists.
Because they have the most pressure.
They have a lot of,
and the highest suicide.
And a lot of alcoholism and a lot of depression and a lot of, you know, so, and what do they do when a patient comes in? Their instinct is to say, no, you'll be okay. Here's some pills, because that's what I do. Brackets, here's, you know, don't worry about your drinking, because that's what I do. And I think that education of, GPs are under massive pressure.
Yeah.
But why should they understand everything about it? They're not psychiatrists. Also,
when I've, you know, spoken to the audience, the ones who get fired first, if you find out they have depression, are the doctors. And the nurses who have depression are out first.
Well, the health service was really, really slow to sign up to the Time to Change campaign as an employer. Most of the health service trusts have now, but they were very, very slow. And you've seen lots of employment tribunals of people within the health service who are being pushed out because of their own mental health problems.
Yeah, but they say by 2020, what'll kill you is stress, okay? We have the cure for malaria. AIDS is, you know, more or less. The one last frontier is, again, if we all understood the brain a little bit, which I put in my book, just a little bite size of understanding how this machine works, you actually won't feel so alone. We all have this dopamine that makes us busier and busier and busier, but we're addicted to it. So it's your job to close that thing down, because it's like having too many cigarettes. Close it down. We have to know when we're at the tipping point. Some people, you know, Richard Branson, sleep 2 hours. We all think, oh, what a guy. You know, this is remarkable. Probably they're crazier than the rest of us. You know, we used to admire these CEOs, right? They're the ones that screw us the hardest because they're not thinking at all. So we really have to say, what's normal? What's well-being? Well-being, not happiness, because that's a hit of dopamine, you know, and then you got to top it and top it and top it. But what we're really going for is when you're at that baseline, when you can think clearly, you're available, I can listen to you. We all know what it is when you're present and when your brain is going 2,000 miles an hour, and I really don't want to live like that.
Do you worry about your children in relation to any sort of genetic inherited?
Well, it isn't, you know, we don't know if it's nature.
No, I
or
know,
nurture.
but do you worry about it?
Well, I watch them really closely, and I married my husband, A, for length, for the tall, and then B, because
Tall.
and then and also
A for length. Okay.
because I say in my show, I want to break the chain of 2,000 years of short-legged immigrants crossing borders, because that's why we kept getting caught. You know, with the pianos on our back. So
okay, he's
my
tall.
children have length. He also, in case it happens to be genetic, comes from that real English, solid, you know, stoic. They were in the trenches.
What, stiff upper lip?
Yeah.
That's a disaster.
No, it isn't, because he was a good front for the kids.
Okay.
So when I was ill, he could really cover for me. I didn't want them to see, because you don't want to have the image of mommy in a turret with her hair on fire. When they were 16, they were allowed in to see me, and by then they could see the other people who had the same disease were actually quite remarkable.
Yeah.
They were smart. They didn't have a knife and were stabbing people to death. Show me one of those.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't so terrifying. And then doing the show, they were proud. One of my kids, again, even I, thought, oh, he's in a bad mood. He's in a bad mood, because almost you don't want to know, because it means that you've done something wrong. And then you start to see, I saw the glassy eyes, and I thought, get this kid on medication or to a psychiatrist, because if you can catch it after one episode, you'll never have it again. It's when you have it over and over and over again, the cortisol is actually burning neurons.
But that's what we don't do, is that early intervention.
No, because the teachers aren't taught to say something's wrong here, get this kid help. Where's the counselor? Does the government do anything? If you catch them early, everything is contained, everything.
Okay, we're going to throw it open to all of you lovely people. Can I just sort of I don't feel you have to do this, but do this 1 in 4 thing. Hands up who considers themselves to be within that 1 in 4.
Oh, that's brave. That's more than 1 in 4.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
But everybody else understands what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, hands up who'd like to ask a question. This lady with the Labour Party jacket.
Bless you, Alastair. Ruby, I've just become a non-exec director of a mental health trust in the NHS just a few weeks ago, and there's so much to learn. And what do you think that the NHS should be doing more than anything else to help with this?
I think there should be courses so that people with mental illness can meet each other, because that's part of the problem. But the gay movement got over this one pretty quickly. We all hunker in shame, too frightened to tell your employer because you might be out of there. So if they could have walk-in centers, meeting places, and you could offer things like mindfulness, Tai Chi, cognitive therapy, in groups. You don't have to do one-to-one anymore. Okay, well, more.
Can I just say about the NHS as well? This point I made about the NHS and not being reluctant to sign up as an employer to Times of Change, I thought was a signal of resistance within, because psychiatric services, I think, are sliding back down the list of priorities. And I think the GP commissioning new GP commissioning system isn't helping that either. So I think the sense of people who are not involved in mental health services understanding and being educated about the importance of mental health services, I think has to happen within the NHS.
The UCHP, the partnership that's the medical partnership around University College Hospital, have mental health fully integrated into the work, whereas that's not the case with every.
And they are renowned for that. I mean, they're renowned, whereas it's not the norm.
Also,
So
where
we
do
need
people
more of
call
it.
up? Is there a line where people can say, I'm in trouble? Or do you have to get in the queue and wait 6 months?
Pass the microphone to the guy next to you.
Yes, good afternoon. My name's Peter Cook. Peace through nudism. Peter Cook once said that the world would never have a problem if everyone were nude. I think he meant focus rather than that particular point. We're sitting here tweeting, it's being videoed, we're all on the telly. Our lives are sliced into ever smaller chunks, aren't we? We've got texts, this, that. Should the government legislate against all of this stuff?
That's
What,
a good
have
question.
That's
an
the guy
all
who's
this
been
stuff
on his
bill?
PC all throughout this.
You go.
I'm not sure how you'd frame an all this stuff, white paper, green paper, bill, and so forth. I think this technological stuff is very, very hard to see how you kind of put it away and put the genie back in the bottle. But I've just sort of anecdotally noticed how often I'm coming across people at the moment who are sort of saying, "Oh, I'm off this Facebook thing. Oh, I'm spending too much time on Twitter. I'm giving it up." Now they're growing. They're still growing. But that's because they're growing new markets. But I have a sense that actually people do think they're losing track of their lives slightly. I don't think the government can necessarily legislate on that. But I think, no, I know. But I do think that they can. I do think government can give leadership about that. To be fair to Cameron, which I don't say very often, I was really pleased when he came out and he made a speech about trying to get happiness, the whole happiness, well-being agenda into policy making. I mean, he's done very, very little about it, but I do think that is the right way to go.
I mean, we've created this, don't forget. Facebook didn't suddenly land in our laps. So it's your responsibility to know your tipping point. Again, it's training to say, this is now dangerous for my health. Yeah. And also, why are you doing it? See, if it's business, okay, stop. Now it's tipping into something else, and that's where we have to question it. Is it the dopamine and the adrenaline because it's so exciting to keep going? Or is it because we're lacking something in ourselves that we need people to know we exist? We really have to question, why are you doing it? Why are you leaving life to tell people what you had for lunch? Is it to get more followers? Will that make you feel loved? Because you'll never have enough. So again, it's this interception. We have to start thinking how we think instead of blaming. So again, it's all about consciousness.
There's a light blue arm. Sorry, it's the light.
Separation from Astute Radio. We always talk about personal responsibility. But sometimes I think, just following on from that, what that gentleman was saying, it's the system that sort of doesn't allow you. It's like when we empower women and we empower ourselves, and then we go back and sit at our desk and all the system around us doesn't allow us to actually change. How can we actually change the system?
I don't know how you can say it won't allow us, okay? Because everything we've evolved into, we would still be stuck, with our oxen and the plow if somebody said, oh, we aren't allowed to. Take the responsibility yourself. Cut through it. There's always a way of weaseling in.
And also the thing about change, I mean, if you look at the big waves and movements of change, I always think, I'm mildly obsessed with Abraham Lincoln. And every time I see Barack Obama make a speech, I never heard Abraham Lincoln speak, and he was a Republican, but I sort of see this direct link back. And along the way, you've got Martin Luther King, and you've got slavery, and you've got all sorts of good and bad stuff happening, but there's a thread of history. Or if you take women and the vote, it drives me crazy when young women in particular say, I can't be bothered I'll vote in X Factor, but I can't be bothered to vote in an election.
Yeah.
And because all these great campaigns, they happen second by second by second, minute by minute, but only if people make them happen. So, and that's why I think on this mental health campaign, I actually feel quite confident that we're going to get there quite quickly, because I feel
A groundswell.
I feel a movement, yeah. And in the end, change is done by movements. It's never, very rare that you get one, like Tim Berners-Lee comes along and does the World Wide Web, and that's one guy you could say who's changed the world for all of us. That's very, very rare. Most of the time you get movements making change, and you only do it if you say, do you know what, as Ruby says, I'm going to change this, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to do something. And we can all then join up the dots, and eventually a picture paints and changes, and it's different to the picture that they used to be.
You know, people always said, you know, should I tell my boss that I have a mental illness? And I sort of said, please don't put that on me, because obviously the government had nothing as a safe hold. But now I've done a lot of talks at Accenture, Goldman Sachs, no, not Goldman Sachs, they're nuts. Deutsche Bank, Boots, and within their companies, they're starting to change their policy. I mean, the head of a very big company, the CEO said, I've got mental illness. And they have a support group within there that says, you will be taken care of, you won't be demoted, you can still rise up, take your 10 days off, just like you would if somebody had anything. Have some pity on the guy. So, you know, the depressed are some of the best workers you'll ever find.
I did one at a bank recently, an audience about twice the size of this, and I did that same thing, 1 in 4 hands up, and nobody put their hand up, and then eventually one guy did, and then another one, and then another one, and it was probably about 1 in 7. But actually, I thought that was
Brave.
Yeah, and then actually they found, and sort of, I've been back there since, they've now got this proper kind of mentoring, mental health support service, and companies that do that are better companies. Yeah.
I feel a bit awkward about this because after the gentleman's question earlier, I work for the RSA and I'm picking up questions from Twitter. So this is all the people who are distracted out in the world or in the room. But we've had a very interesting question that's come in from Scarlett Telling Tales, asking if there's too much emphasis on CBT, on cognitive behavioural therapy, as a kind of cure-all for mental illness and mental health problems. So given what you've been discussing, maybe a few thoughts on that.
Listen, anything, if it works for you. Prayer, don't forget, there was places to go in and reflect. I don't know where they are anymore. I can't find them on the map. You know, there were the older woman in the family. Of course, we don't respect that anymore. There were so many possibilities. I'm just saying, and even therapy, there's somebody who's listening. It's not mommy who's going to punish you for those thoughts. It's relationship. I'm just saying I looked at the latest statistics. It happens to be, at this moment, you know, besides medication, all we've got. And it gives you a way of saying, I'm thinking this way, but it isn't the way the rest of the world is. That's a reality check.
I did a CBT thing a few years ago, and it just didn't work for me. And I reached a point of deciding that actually, do you know what? Every now and again, probably for the rest of my life, I'm going to get really bad bouts of depression. And every time that it happens, I go and see somebody. I hate taking the medication, but I do, and slowly I kind of get through it. And maybe I'll take up what Ruby's saying, and maybe that, because 7 years sounds quite good to me. But so there you are, and it may have been down to the individual person I was with. I really didn't like the sweaters that he wore, and I became mildly obsessed about them, and I kept going to these things thinking, I wonder what his sweater's going to look like.
And then the thing is that rather than piling the kind of shame on, I don't like this guy and
Please
this bothers me.
don't tweet that, by the way, because he knows who he is. And God, he might be watching. No. It was a woman in sweaters. Sorry, yeah.
Part of the problem is like, get off your own back. Whatever treatment does that, is because we get stressed and then we're stressed about feeling stress. Like what a jerk I am because, you know, I'm thinking these things. You're anxious about anxiety. It's like we send in a second arrow. So somebody said pain is pain, but suffering is optional. So it's something, that's okay. He doesn't like the woman with the sweater. That's okay, move away. But, you know, sometimes we brood on it. Why don't I like the woman with the sweater? Do you think something's wrong with me? Right? It's a bit like forgiveness, but that's something we used to have in religion. We don't have it anymore.
I couldn't forgive the stripy one. It was just...
But that's okay. Let it go.
Hi, my name's Deborah Huskin, and I just want to say that to me, the important thing that you guys are doing is you're naming something that we all around here feel, and sense, but too often we don't name it and we don't talk about it. That's what's so fabulous about going into companies and saying how many of you are 1 in 4. And I want to add something to the conversation that I think is really important, and that is, it seems to me that what underlies a lot of what you're talking about is the level of trauma that we as a world are experiencing. It's all around us. It's been all around us for generations. It's a systemic thing. When one person in a system is impacted by trauma, everyone around them is impacted by that trauma. And that wound is part of what makes us nutty, because we feel that wound, but we don't know where to go with it. We don't know how to talk about it.
Okay.
So I just want to say thank you so much for naming this and talking about it. It's so important.
Okay, well, that was a very good observation. But now we've got about 10 minutes. We can keep questions really, really tight, and we'll try and keep our answers very tight as well.
Thank you so much. I'm Jutta Tobias from Cranfield University. And Deborah, I think I'm asking, I would like you to speak to the mirror image of what Deborah's just been talking about, because I sense that mindfulness is not just beneficial for people who are diagnosed, or people who or who lack or who have overcome the shame of saying, I am 1 in 4. I think it's hugely beneficial for anybody and everybody. And I would love to find out, how has your environment changed? How have your kids changed because of you dealing with a way to get over and to embrace and befriend this condition that's universal and that maybe we don't want a classification for?
Okay. How's it changed, you and your kids?
Again, we have a hit-on effect of everybody. But I've had to sit through the horror of watching how I think, and everybody has their living hell. I could explain why we have those voices, but I don't have time. It's actually just patterns that you've built up. So I noticed, especially when I interviewed people, that I thought I was being quite charming, right? And why didn't they give me their phone number? And when I looked on the screen, I looked like an animal that was about to run over and make, you know, and I have, when I'm stressed, I have that aggression. I had no idea. Other people have the instinct, whatever it is, background, something happened. I'm not going to go to a therapist to analyze. It's just there. Some people have a habit of hunkering down, you know. So I kind of, by seeing this is my proclivity, the mindfulness, by getting that anchor when I feel that the fangs starting to come, just by noticing there's a little gap, and that means it goes to the prefrontal cortex, right out of the limbic system, which is our animal instinct. As soon as it's there, which happens automatically when you feel, you know, that, and you don't respond like a, you know, on a trigger finger, you start to use attention, awareness, you start to rehearse what other things you might do. So it's not repression, it's just saying, okay, I see this is the habit. It's actually embedded in the neurons, this habit. And when you change the habit, more neurons grow, other possibilities. The problem is, again, we live thinking, that's who you are, I hate the person in the sweater, whatever. When you question it a little bit, because you realize that's your habit, you break the habits. The neurons change.
Okay.
So it is for everybody. It isn't for depression. It's really good for your health.
Let's go real quick fire now. Yep.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I run an infertility support group called Mindful Mama-to-Be, which is using mindfulness to help women struggling to conceive and going through fertility treatment. And I'm working with the Infertility Network charity, and we're really trying to push that if anyone's going through fertility treatment, mindfulness should just be part and parcel of that treatment, rather than you could have counselling if you want. It should be, it's open to everyone. And I noticed on the Time for Change, of postnatal depression is listed, but infertility isn't listed, so it'd be really nice to get that added in.
We should take that totally on board. Yep, this gentleman. Is anybody from Time to Change here?
Through Baker?
Shocking.
Yeah.
Can somebody tweet Campbell Claret shocked that infertility not on Time to Change website? Save me do. It's great. I love it about Twitter.
What?
That's what I love about Twitter. You don't have to do anything. Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to take time out of your life.
No, somebody's doing it now.
Yeah.
It's just their time. It's fine.
Yeah, but they're not. They're gone somewhere. They're missing everything. They're on Twitter.
Yes, sir.
My name's Chris. I'm a fellow, but I'm also a secondary head teacher. And I brought my school counsellor here as well, actually, so we could hear the message. One one question I have for both of you, and it's probably will also to evolve into a plea really, is what can you do to raise expectations and awareness to support young people? Because we are in a situation where resources have been withdrawn, so CAMS is much less than what it was, and it was never really that accessible to begin with. We have a lot of children who, I mean, you referenced cutting, Ruby, and I'd say in my school we have a pandemic of self-harm, and I know all head teachers are struggling with that at the minute. But also, you referenced teacher training, and whilst I'm very sensitive to what you're saying about ensuring teachers have more knowledge regarding mental health issues, I also think that it could be something best left in the hands of the specialists. But what I'd ask you is, what can you do within your both of your roles of thought leadership and real leadership in this issue? And if your answer is at present not much, what will you do?
Shall I go?
Yeah, you go.
Well, I went to the Tory Party conference this year for the first time in 20 years. And partly, I was there actually for alcohol concern and lobbying about that, because I think that's the other absolute crisis we're not facing up to, is the extent to which alcohol has now got a grip on kind of every level of society. So I was randomly trying to bump into ministers and have a debate with them and trying to get them to take it seriously. And I ended up talking to all sorts of them about all sorts of things. And I think you do, I mean, in the end, governments do have enormous power. And you have to make your case again and again and again and again. And I do worry that this government actually doesn't get this. I think that if you look at if you read everything as I do that Michael Gove says about education, he's very narrowly focused
But
upon certain
what can the government do?
Well, I'm talking about what we can do. What we can do is keep campaigning on this, joining up those dots till eventually you get a tipping point and they can't not take it seriously. Because I think that governments have got thousands of things they're having to deal with. And I talked earlier about how GPs, I think, don't know enough about identifying mental health problems. So how can a teacher be expected to, unless that becomes part of their training? And then you say, well, we're already being loaded with this and loaded with that and loaded with the other, so it becomes more difficult for you, and then you probably find the unions don't want to get involved and so forth. So that's why you have to have this bigger dialogue about this. And the more that people get involved in these campaigns and the more that people feel we can normalise discussion about mental health in a way that, for example, no politician dares say, I'm going to damage the NHS, okay? But actually, they do in relation to mental health services, because it's just not a sexy thing, and you've just got to keep going, I'm afraid.
But on a practical level, if the kids understand, or you understand, that when there's too much information, there's too much stress on success, or whatever, that the most important thing is to calm their levels down. I don't care, if they have little 5-minute government, you have to do this, 5 minutes to sit down and let their little systems cool. There is a great thing that I think is being offered in some schools, because they have to regulate themselves. If they get too stressed, all this is in a red mist. And again, neurons are killed, the memory goes down, the blood, the oxygen leave your head. If the kids understand that, they can start to regulate themselves. So there is a thing, this is just one thing. When the kid has a hissy fit, he holds up a red card. Nobody's allowed within 6 feet, right? And going, oh, are you okay? Because they'll kill that person. Then when they start to feel it's coming down, they hold up a yellow card. And when they're back at baseline, because the kid knows when he's back, he's aware again, he holds up a green card. Now imagine that in business, because you'd know this isn't a debate anymore. We're killing each other. We're in the limbic system and our antlers are locked. Imagine if we're in a world, even in the government, where they hold up a white flag and say, okay, it's not about me winning. I'm screwed. My cortisol is too high, and go off and sit down and get it down. That's why don't put them on Ritalin. Train them. Train them to bring down their own levels instead of making more anxiety.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Don't bother with the microphone. Man with the beard, shout out. Okay, let me take 2 more questions. That lady there. We'll wrap.
Can we answer the question?
No, let's do 3 at once, then we'll wrap up.
Oh,
Okay, my experience of mindfulness as a therapist is that it's a really useful tool, but my experience also is that a lot of the roots of mental illness lie in early childhood. And I wonder if, Alastair, if you've got anything to say about what the government should be doing to put the resources into really early childhood intervention.
Okay, and I'm sorry it's the last one, but this lady here, we'll both hang around and we can mingle, but...
I was just thinking about my stepmom, who's a teacher, that was doing yoga for infants in the school, just as a way of like getting the kids calm. And then a friend that does go into primary and secondary schools teaching mindfulness, but she does it with the teachers, so the teachers get to experience it, and then they get like a meditation that they can do with the kids. So, I mean, I suppose I was thinking the teachers aren't qualified, but they are just getting to share what they experience with the kids, so it's getting out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, again, it's not where it isn't learning how to run in the marathon, even in a tiny way. And of course, I feel a little embarrassed because it does sound. If the kid, when he's eating, actually experiences what the taste tastes like, because what we do is, if you buy chocolate, you taste the first one, but the rest, you're just wasting your money and getting fat for no reason. If the teacher really explains how to experience the taste, the feel of the ground, the sound, or looking at, or listening to nature, they'll understand what attention is. So then you can just gently take it to the math. It's about training attention and throwing focus. That's all mindfulness is, really. And so you can start in the schools, and it's real easy.
I think on the young and the old, and what governments can do, I mean, one of the problems in the way that the government policy is debated generally is that there's always a question about resources. And particularly now when you've got austerity, governments under pressure around the world and so forth. But for example, I think with the elderly, that we sort of just say as a given, which it is, that the population is getting older. I read this extraordinary stat the other day that last year more nappies were sold in Japan to adults than to babies, which was just like the most extraordinary kind of wow in terms of how many older people there are that are... Now that's good on one level, we're all living longer, but I think there's been an acceptance at a societal level that actually most people's lives are going to end rather horribly, with Alzheimer's, with really difficult and serious diseases, in homes and having to sell their homes. And again, you have to... Politics never operates in a vacuum. Governments are making decisions related to other decisions all the time. So that's why, I mean, Alzheimer's, I think, have made, and the Alzheimer's charities have made incredible progress in terms of getting this on the agenda as a deeply, if you like, unsexy issue. And that then plays into funding, it plays into research, it plays into whether the government considers it a priority or not. And I think with children, I mean, one of the reasons that I thought one of the best things we did as a Labour government was the Sure Start programme, because it understood that concept that right in the early years, particularly if children were growing up in homes that were, challenged and difficult, or there was violence and alcoholism or whatever in the home, that you've that's where the intervention of the local and national authorities, I think, can be very, very effective. And again, you have to have campaigns for this, because otherwise it just won't happen. It's not going to happen on its own. And I think it was when we're talking, say, for example, about self-harm, I was, when I was researching, I've got this character who self-harms in this book, and I researched it. I just couldn't believe how much of it was going on when I got into it. I mean, I was genuinely shocked.
Well, it's their only release.
Yeah, and that's what they say. This is our only release. And you think, how have we got to that?
And it's the only way we can feel. We eventually don't feel anything if there's so much incoming.
Now, there's a lady in a beautiful red dress down here who's going like that, which means we've gone over our time. But that was an hour that whizzed by. I'm sorry that we didn't have time for all of the questions, but we're both going to mingle for a bit. And thanks for coming.
Thank you for coming.
And thanks for supporting the campaign.
Thanks for listening.
Well done.